Well, what is going on, Mark Baxter? Thank you so much for joining us. And why don't you tell everybody, if anybody's watching this, where you're joining us from?
Yeah, I'm sitting here in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, and we have a team over here of 7 people, and myself and a couple other friends came over to visit the team, and it's actually been an amazing thing to see. What we're going to talk about a little bit tonight is I have seen the fruit of it here. In fact, I just saw it about an hour ago, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But that's where I'm at in Dubai and loving it. Beautiful city.
Absolutely. It's on my bucket list to go. Everybody I've said I've talked to who's been there said it's absolutely incredible. And you're kind
Yep.
of right at the heart of a lot of things going on in the world right there, which is really, really cool. So,
Yep.
but Mark, tell us a little about who are you? What are you doing? What do you do for your, in ministry and in leadership? Give
Yeah.
anybody a little intro on you.
Well, for the past 28 years, my wife and I have been with Youth with a Mission, or YWAM.
Mm-hmm.
Started in Nashville, Tennessee, had a great 7 years there, and then started the new YWAM base in Jacksonville about 21 years ago. And we started that base because we wanted to focus on the part of the world where the people have never, ever heard the gospel, areas where what we call unreached people live. And so been doing that. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was asked to come on as a part-time staff, sort of, with our home church in Jacksonville to lead their missions program. And so it did not conflict with what I've been doing with YWAM. I still got total freedom to do that, but I also help with direction and recruiting and just all the different parts of missions in a local church. And then one other thing, in addition to that, those two things, one of the things that's really changed my life in a major way in the last probably now 4 or 5 years has been becoming part of a network called No Place Left.
Amazing.
And that's very, very dynamic, simple network of sharing the gospel and making disciples who make disciples who make disciples. So, yeah, it's really has been life changing. I mean, I've trained missionaries for many years, but this this No Place Left stuff and what we're seeing now, it's awesome.
I only have a little bit of exposure. And I've shared a little bit of this with you in the past, of just kind of getting my world rocked about a year and a half ago, with some of these principles of just quickly multiplying, churches, things that I've been passionate about for a long time, but stumbled across, some of their stuff and Jeff Sundell and what some trainings online, these really poorly, like just bad recorded YouTube videos. And I'm like, this stuff is so brilliant. And I'm like, why is this not being shared in every church I've ever been in? Why am I not hearing some of these concepts, like, gospel sharing in the four fields and these, to that level and with that simple strategy. So I'd love to go there. And if anybody from No Place Left is watching this or ends up seeing it, you're coming on the show very soon. You're on my shoot to kill list to get on the podcast. But Mark, man, so exciting. Tell us a little bit more about what you've done over the last maybe few years and what you're doing right now with young people, really specifically. What's your passion? What's your focus? What are you lasered in on right now?
Yeah, we are wanting to make disciples who make disciples. So our whole thing is when we have people coming for what we would call a missionary training school now, we are what we want for our outcome has shifted, and it sounds like a small shift, but it's really significant. In the past, what we wanted is to make disciples, and we wanted them to be, this typical well-behaved, nice people, and quit doing stuff and start doing other stuff. And we had our lists and all that fun stuff. And what has happened, just this slight little shift, it's still important who you are, especially in a reproducing ministry, because you'll reproduce what you are. So it's still important. But our outcome that we're looking for now are not just well-behaved disciples. We're wanting to have disciple makers. That is our outcome that we're shooting for. And so it doesn't sound like a big shift, but it is, because that requires equipping, and that requires encouragement and practice. And so one of the biggest things that it's required of me personally and of those that are involved in our training is we have to be out in the harvest, sharing the gospel with lost people, not
Wow.
not talking about evangelism, but doing evangelism regularly. So we're out at least 3 times a week, knocking on doors, sharing the gospel with people who we don't know and we do know, and it doesn't matter. We're just going to share the gospel with anybody that we possibly can, with the intent, again, of not just getting converts. That's not the goal. The goal is to get disciples who then immediately we begin to train to do exactly what we have been doing, and that is going out and making more disciples. And so I just wish I would have learned this stuff 20, 30 years ago, because, Great Commission doesn't say to plant churches. It doesn't say to do evangelism. What the Great Commission says to do is to make disciples. And evangelism is part of it, and forming churches is part of it, but the focus is making disciples. And so, and you don't have a disciple unless they're making disciples, because a disciple is somebody who obeys the commands of Jesus. And one of his commands is to make disciples. So if you're making disciples, they're going to be making disciples who are making disciples. So yeah, that's our outcome now that we're shooting for, is disciple makers. And I'm seeing it here in Dubai. I have to say that with this team I came to visit. I was just at a meeting in a park with people from Nepal, India, Pakistan, and some had just accepted the Lord. Some had, within the last month, accepted the Lord. Were already bringing their friends to these meetings out in the park. And we maybe had, I don't know, maybe 50 people total. I'm not sure. But these guys were our team here. They've been here less than 2 months, about a month and a half. And we're already seeing fruit. But the cool thing is, it's fruit that will continue to bear fruit, because these people are being equipped now to make disciples. And so when our team leaves next week, it's not like it's over. It's like it's only just begun here in Dubai. And so that's the exciting thing. This aspect of multiplication is powerful. That's how we're going to change the world, is by multiplying disciples. And so I saw it today. I saw a bunch of people who are walking around with these things on their phone. I'll try to show that to you, these nice little 3 circles, just a simple diagram to show the gospel. We got these guys who have just become believers who have a tool already now to share the gospel and have started sharing the gospel. And so today we went over one of the commands of Jesus in 3 different groups, because there were so many. It was just so good. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, and I want to hear more stories, but I just wanted to, and this may take up more time than we'd like, but I am fascinated and shocked and frustrated all at the same time. Why what you just described, 50 people meeting at a park, you got people who just started following Christ. It's just like the woman at the well, or the demoniac, right? Like, it sounds like, somebody immediately comes to Christ. There is a conversion, and then they're just they're right into doing the work of reaching other people. And we slow that down so much in the US. I feel like I've experienced that in my own life. Like, why is that? I mean, like, I live in Kansas City. Chiefs, come on. If anybody's watching it outside of Kansas City here, go Chiefs. Come on. Next year, we're coming back. Mahomes is hungry.
Yes.
We're ready to roll. You got to sometimes lose, just realize what you had. Why is that not happening? at the level that maybe you're seeing internationally?
Yeah, well, I think we've just gotten a little distracted probably with a lot of good programs, and they are good. Uh, but I think, the mission of the church is to make disciples. And I think with a desire to help people who are in need, and it's legitimate need, we've started all kinds of programs and doing all kinds of things, again, that are not bad, they are good, but there isn't that underlying foundational, passionate commitment to making disciples. So, for example, if you're going to have a child rearing class or a young married class or all the different things that are all good and important, uh, the bottom line for all of that is if they're disciples of Jesus, if they're following Jesus, things are uh, probably whatever they're challenged with, we're going to see some progress in. And I know that there are other principles that help in each different situation, but bottom line is uh, I just don't see that passionate, uh, full-on commitment to make disciples. So if for that to change, it's not difficult. That's the exciting news. For that to change, all you have to do is start getting out in the harvest. You just got to get out in the harvest, because people in the harvest haven't been infected with that church program way of thinking. And so that's where you can find new, fresh, exciting people who, as far as they know, Christian shares the gospel, because that's what they started doing the day after they got saved, because we modeled that for them. And so I really believe that it can change if it really does probably start with leadership in the church, being out in the harvest, taking people with them, equipping the saints, like it talks about in Ephesians 4, just actually going out and modeling it and equipping. So the good news here is it's not difficult to to really see a commitment renewed. You just got to get in the harvest. And then, for us, it's very simple. We share the gospel. We want them to accept the Lord. Like you said, there is that point of conversion, yes, but it doesn't stop there. Then we just begin to teach them the commands of Jesus, not just intellectually, but how to obey the commands of Jesus. And all of this is free stuff. All of it is simple stuff. It is so simple. I think some people don't even want to trust it because it's so simple. They want to get out their theological books and, have discussion and argument. I would say, let them argue. Let's go to the harvest. We'll win some people and begin to disciple them. And I think it's, so that's what we're doing. And this can happen in the U.S. It doesn't just happen in Dubai or India or China or other places. We can do this in the U.S.
I am consistently shocked the amount of conversations I have about this with other pastor friends who are like, yeah, that's great, but that just works in Africa and it doesn't work here. It's just not the same. And I agree with you. Why I got coffee with a friend who works with the House Micro Church, movement in Kansas City. KC Underground. So if anybody, I know we're going to have those guys come onto the show in a couple weeks, a few guys from there. And they were talking about a training that one of their higher ups in the organization, Rob Wagner, was doing with a group of, a big group. I think it was like a big Zoom call kind of webinar deal with like 50 pastors around the US. And he said that the vast majority of them, when he asked, have any of you guys individually had someone disciple you, model this for you, model disciple making for you in your life as a pastor, the vast majority of them had never had someone personally walk them through it. Yeah. And they're in this position of leadership, scared because they've never seen it. They've never had it modeled for them the way, Jesus modeled for the disciples, the way you're modeling for all the young people that you're working with, the way you were modeling for the leaders. Why is that the case? And how do we get out of that cycle? Because I think like you only can control, You know, you can't control if
Yeah.
you're sitting there and you're like, I've never had it modeled for me. How am I supposed to model it for somebody else other than, you know, just, you know,
Yeah.
and thank God for technology, but how would you begin to start to like chisel away at that problem? Because I think it's a major problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
I experienced that even in
yeah,
my
you
own
have to
life
make
as a young
intentional
pastor.
choices. Yeah, I think everybody needs. You've heard this before, like the 2 Timothy 2:2. Everybody needs everybody needs a Paul, somebody who is mentoring you. Everybody needs a Barnabas, like a peer, and everybody needs a Timothy, somebody who you are mentoring. We need those are to maintain a really healthy walk, is to have people who are mentoring you and people who you're walking with and people who you are mentoring. So I think it's just making some choices that you're gonna find those people, and I think it needs to be a priority. And once you find them, and by the way, it doesn't have to be people older than you to be your mentors. I have a friend in Jacksonville, a doctor, Dr. Jeff. He's younger than I am, but he just is a total encouragement to me to be out in the harvest regularly. He's a doctor at Mayo, and he takes his lunch hour every Wednesday. We go out knocking on doors, and I respect him so much. And I know that he's going to be there waiting for me on Wednesday. And so there's a little bit of accountability that helps, but I consider him a mentor. And so I think, again, here's the cool thing about this. None of it is complex. None of it requires seminary education. None of it requires a major change in anything. It's simple obedience to sharing the gospel, making disciples, training up some leaders. You know, it's Acts 14. They were preaching the gospel. They were strengthening the souls of the disciples. So they're discipling, and then they were preparing elders for the churches. They were doing leadership training. So it's preaching the gospel, making disciples, and leadership training. None of it is complex. It's just, it needs to be the focus. Maybe that's the biggest issue here. It's focus. If we will focus on that, I think we can accomplish it. I like this line. It's not in the Bible, but I like it anyway. The man who chases two rabbits catches none. You got to have the focus. You know, you got to go after it. So yeah.
Let's unpack that a little bit. Say you're a young I mean, I'm a youth pastor at a local church. You know, I have a team of
awesome
35 volunteers. I have a youth ministry of around, you know, right now 120, 130 students, whatever it is, you know, give or take. So
yeah.
I feel so much pressure to just keep the machine rolling that it's hard to find, you know, it's not so much a time thing, but like you said, it's a focus, it's an energy thing, it's a priorities. Yeah. How do you incorporate that into what you're already doing?
That's a challenge.
Is it possible, or do you have to totally blow up your entire
possible.
ministry?
No, I don't think so. But I will say this. I have a mentor in Tampa. His name is Lee Wood. Fantastic guy. He's got a movement happening in Tampa of house churches all over the city. And I talk to him regularly. He was a coach of mine every week for a while, and now I just talk to him not as often. But he continued to challenge me to focus on a few. It doesn't mean you neglect the rest. You love them, you encourage them, you challenge them, yes. But when it comes to making disciples, you can't disciple 100 kids. Just can't happen. You can help 100 kids in following Jesus. You can give them some, you know, good advice. You can do some things that are significant in their life. But as far as actually making disciples, what Lee has challenged me in over and over and over again is to focus on a few who will focus on a few who will focus on a few. In fact, one time, interesting, I was at the largest church in the world in Seoul, Korea, and heard Dr. Cho preach, and later talked to an elder at his church. And he asked, I asked him something about how does Dr. Cho oversee such a massive organization? And this elder told me that he basically leads 24 pastors on his staff, and they then lead pastors. He had a total of 1,200 pastors on his staff because he had over 700,000 members at the time. So how do you do that? He was focusing on 24 people. He's probably got, well, he definitely has a lot more capacity than I have. I can't focus on 24. I really need to narrow that down a little bit more probably. And so
Right.
I have to focus on a few. So I think, again, you're not neglecting everybody. Again, Pastor Cho, he's still preaching to 700,000 people, biblical messages to challenge them at this time, at least. I don't know where they're at now, but I'm just saying, you don't neglect everybody else, but when it comes to actually making disciples, what I've been challenged with is you really need to find those that are faithful, available, and teachable.
The
Faithful,
fatties.
find the fat people like me, and find those people, and those are the ones that you really want to pour that additional time in and really focus on. Yeah.
I would love to hear, what, just get a little into the weeds with how you're currently modeling that. Because I think for me, and for a lot of people, a lot of pastors, at least, that aren't used to that level of intentional, whether it's door-to-door evangelism, whether it's going around doing prayer walks, I think a lot of us just don't have that a part of our normal rhythm where we easily could. But I think some of it's just we haven't seen it, and it feels a little too like it's almost too simple, that it's so abstract that it almost there's a part of me where I'm like, that kind of freaks me out a little bit. So I'm like, what do I do? Like, I know maybe it's just as simple as sharing it, but like, what do I actually just spell it out? Does that make sense? Is that weird for me to say that?
That was very significant what you just said, because I just experienced this a couple of weeks ago. It's not something to try by yourself. You need to have 2 or 3 people who have a vision like this. They're wanting to make disciples who make disciples. They're wanting to have a significant impact. And you have those people, and together, like Jesus didn't send them out individually. He sent them out 2 by 2s. And I think I just saw that in my own life, how important that is to have others with me. And so I just think it is that simple. It is doing prayer walks and asking God to lead you to the person of peace. You share the gospel. That person of peace is somebody who receives the messenger, the message, and the mission. You find the person of peace, and you begin to pour into him, and it is that simple, but it won't happen. Jesus doesn't very often use lone rangers. He had 12 disciples himself, and I think he left us a model to follow. So yes, it is that simple. And because of that, I agree with you that some people don't think it's what they want to give their lives to because it's so simple. Just doesn't seem very significant, but it is. Yeah.
So let's get practical.
Yeah.
How would you coach? How would you coach a pastor of a traditional church, maybe in the United States, to kind of start implementing these things? Hours a week, some simple coaching, like, hey, start here, go here, try this for an hour or 2. You say you're personally committed to 3 hours a week of that. What does that look like for you when you're sitting in Jacksonville?
Yeah. I'm not sure about coaching a senior pastor. Most of them are so busy already with their schedules, it's very difficult. I think a lot of times what we're finding, what we just did this fall, is we had only a small group of 7 students came. We had some staff. We went through Bible stories, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoon, we went out knocking on doors. And what we found, and this, we just found that you can oftentimes find the workers in the harvest, the people who come to the Lord, because Jesus said the harvest is ripe. So if you'll go out in the harvest, you will win people to Jesus. That's just the way it works. And when you do that, you'll begin to make disciples, and you'll begin to see the people who are fat. those ones that they're ready to grow and they're excited what just happened in their life. And so that's where that focus comes in and really pouring into those people. But so for me, like if I had a youth group, which I was a youth pastor like 30 years ago, and what you do is a fantastic work. It's awesome. What I would do now is I would continue with my youth meetings and continue to challenge the groups, but I would be looking for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 maybe, but not too many, and really ask them to make a commitment to join you in sharing the gospel and making disciples. And they could, initially can start among their friends and begin to meet with their friends and maybe their family. It may end up at some point getting to a place where you're having to knock on doors, but whatever it takes to just have a group like that, a small group that you can mentor, and that multiplication can begin. So it just sounds so simple. And the thing is, it is that simple. I mean, this group in Dubai, it's part of those 7 students I was just talking about, and they're already having an impact in this place that is just so incredible. They started doing it in Jacksonville. Now they're doing it in Dubai. Some are coming back to Jacksonville. We will be working with us. Wherever they end up going, they're going to have this impact. So, yeah, I think find a few and really pour into them. That's the key.
I have been getting a lot of training on using tools like the Discovery Bible Study method as an evangelistic tool. What does that look like for you guys? I mean, when you're taking students out, these young people with YWAM or whatever, are you going, you said you're knocking on a door. Are you immediately diving, hey, we're out here telling people about what God's done in our life. Did you jump right into a gospel illustration, or do you maybe engage in some spiritual conversation that leads to a Discovery Bible Study that leads to a gospel presentation?
Yeah.
Because I know that there's different philosophy. There's the more aggressive side, like get right to the gospel. Then there's the more, hey, let's be a little more relational, maybe get people who are spiritually interested via conversation to maybe a discovery study and let the Holy Spirit speak to them as you go. And I understand it's probably both and, but I'd love to hear maybe a couple stories on either side of those spectrums for you.
So me, Dr. Jeff, another staff person from YWAM, knock on the door, never met the person. This lady answers the door. She's a hairdresser. She's got a little barber's chair in the middle of her living room at this apartment complex. She invites us in. We go in. Nathan shares his testimony. Dr. Jeff prays for him. I asked, can I share the gospel with you? They said, sure. I asked, can I show you a picture? And I used this little diagram, and they said yes. So I shared the gospel. The lady who's getting her hair cut prays to accept Jesus. The lady who is doing the actual hair cutting is already a believer. So here's the key. Next question I ask, after she accepts the Lord and the other one is already a believer, I asked the lady whose apartment it was, I said, could I come back next week and we'll start a little Bible study here? She said, yes. Next week I went back, trained her in how to use the 3 circles gospel presentation. Doesn't matter what presentation you use, I don't think. Anyway, went back that next night or the next week on a Monday night, trained her in this, actually had her then a week after that sharing the gospel with her aunt using the 3 circles. And we've been going through some of the basic commands of Jesus and how to obey them. And so those are easy to find, obeychrist.com, totally free. Give you a simple discovery Bible study on the basic commands of Jesus. Again, none of this is difficult. You just have to do it. And so we are, I'm meeting with this lady. She is from Benin. So she's from West Africa, living in Jacksonville. It's somewhat jokingly, but somewhat seriously now refer to her as Pastor Nati, because that's her name, Nati. Wow. And I just believe that she's going to be the pastor of her little house church. And so We do get to the gospel. We want to share the gospel. It's good news. Why wouldn't we want to share the gospel? Of course, it's the best news they could ever hear. So we share the gospel. We do it in a friendly, loving, we do it with a smile on our face. And then we immediately, when someone says yes, we ask for the next appointment and we begin to equip them. And I just have to say, one of the absolute best equipping tools I have ever seen, now being a Christian for 40 years, is what's called the 411. And you just need to look that up. You can find it on YouTube. Just 411 training. It's just a very simple tool on why we share the gospel. Who are we going to share it with? What do we say? And when are we going to do it? 4 questions. Wow. It's so simple. So I do that every time on my first appointment back. I share the 411. And then the next appointment, we continue. Then we start going through the commands of Jesus. So, and by the way, this is not only live, we're also doing it on Zoom now around the world. We get people who want to get discipled. We do this exact same thing. If they're believers, we do the 411. Then we start in on the commands of Jesus. And within a short time, we're expecting the group to multiply. That's the whole idea of multiplication. So I just thrown out some really, really, really good, significant tools.
Yeah.
And I hope you grab a hold of that, because this 3 circles thing has revolutionized my sharing the gospel. The 411 is the best equipping tool I've ever seen. And the commands of Jesus, this is just what Jesus said in the Great Commission. He said, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded. This is how you make disciples. So those are just 3 simple tools I just dropped on you, and those are life-changing. Those are life-changing for an old guy like me who's been a believer for 40 years, but also for a young guy like you. I'm just, in a good way, I'm jealous that you can get tools like this now, because I'm telling you, the multiplication, the potential world impact is phenomenal. So it's awesome.
I love that. I'm such a fan of practical tools. I'm a pretty relational, organic person, but I know myself. I'm an Enneagram 7. I'm a relational. I like to have fun. I hate being uncomfortable. And I think that for me is why I want to get into, I just know that about myself. And I don't know. I mean, depending on who you are, you might be really good just being a driver. I'm more organic, and I think I shy away from stuff that really pushes me in that place. But I understand, and that's where tools for me, it's kind of that Navy SEAL principle, you don't rise to the level of the vision, you fall to the level of your training. I've heard that as a timeless principle. Good. Where I'm like, that is so true. I was talking to a friend about sharing the gospel specifically, who, not that they were anti-gospel illustration, but they just said it just feels so rigid, and so many people reject that. I was like, yeah, but when you're in the heat of the moment and you're like, I'm either going to throw up, die, pray that God raptures me, I just want to crawl into a hole because I'm scared right now. Like, having a tool and an illustration is incredibly helpful, because you're like, I could botch this whole thing and look, I already feel like a crazy person, but at least I memorized the script, and I think I heard this phenomenal teaching from a guy named Bob Harrison, who used to be on staff with Student Mobilization up at K-State, who just unpacked Romans 1:16, and he says, man, like,
awesome.
Don't be afraid. The gospel is the power of God for salvation.
Yes, amen.
He says it's the stick of dynamite. It's like that, the power, that dynamite. He did his preaching on the Greek word dynamos in the Greek is like, and I remember I was so scared because it was right before he preached that, right before we went out to the beach in Gulf Shores, Alabama. We were just doing kind of 2x2 evangelism, and I was like, I hate this. This is the worst. And I just remember just praying, the gospel is the power of God for salvation. Do I believe that? Of course I believe that. And I had this interaction with this kid who, there's these group of high school kids that were from New Orleans. They were there just drunk. They were just playing football, drinking beers, throwing, smoking cigars, having a good time, sweet, fun kids, and we ended up sharing with them, and they had a group of their friends came over. So we ended up splitting. I wasn't even supposed to share, but I was just supposed to share my testimony, but then Justin my other buddy handed me a card. He's like, you go do it with these guys. Cause he's like, we're already halfway through it. I don't want to restart it. So I'm like, okay, here we go. And I zoned out. I was like, I don't even know what I just said. But at the end of it, you know, a couple of the guys got kind of bored and walked off, but then two of the guys stayed. And I had this moment that just rocked me where I had this kid, he took his sunglasses off. He's like, I'm Catholic. I don't really know what I believe. And because I got to this point where I was, you know, we were just walking through like a bridge illustration. And he's like, I don't really know. I'm not really ready to give my life to Jesus. He says, but like, I don't know what you're doing, but please keep doing it. He's like, when I'm talking to you, he's like, I feel like I'm talking to Jesus. Like I can see it in your eyes. And I'm like, what the heck? Yeah. I'm like, I grew up very, you know, not so like fundamental evangelical Bible church, you know, like ladies wearing denim skirts, and church is so boring. And all we did was read the Bible and go home, and we never talked about it again. And I've heard the gospel my whole life. And I'm like, I had never experienced something so powerful of really the Holy Spirit showing up and just like, challenging this kid right in the moment. And for me, I was like, it was a monumental moment for me. So, and I still need to fight to get myself to have the courage to share. So how do you get to that spot, just as maybe as an encouragement for people who are afraid? Because I think even I still struggle. Like I said, I still struggle with that. I struggle with fear. I struggle with not wanting not wanting to be uncomfortable, not wanting to put myself into a situation where I'm rejected, where I'm persecuted. Of course, all these things that Jesus says that we will. But how would you encourage? How do you get yourself into the framework and the mindset of having courage? You're going 3 days a week. You're knocking on people's doors. Like, how do you get to that spot?
I don't know that I could do it by myself. Like today, just give you an example. I was at the park here in Dubai. There's a big group of maybe 20 men under another tree. I asked one of the guys who was with us, I said, who are those guys over there? He said, they're a bunch of guys from Pakistan. They were all Muslims. Well, on my own, I'm not going to go over there, most likely. So I did what I really didn't want to do, but I did it anyway, as I asked. And I even was thinking about it as I'm walking up to one of my friends. I'm thinking, do I even want to ask him? And so I went up to one of my friends. I said, you want to go talk to those guys? He says, yeah. So we went together. Both of us probably wishing we had said no as we're walking over there. But it was that friendly accountability, that doing it with somebody else. And we walked up to these guys and found out they were actually all from Afghanistan, 20 of them, Muslims. And we started a nice conversation and we shared the gospel. Nobody accepted the Lord, and a couple of them were a little bit upset with us, actually, because they started drilling in on this Jesus God. So we're not always going to get the results we want. I wish all 20 had fallen on their faces and accepted Jesus. Didn't happen. But the way that I got through that, and by the way, I'm really thankful tonight that I did that I shared the gospel with all those Muslims from Afghanistan, because I don't know that they had ever heard the gospel in their life. So I'm glad we did it now. I look back on it now, and I'm Lord for that opportunity. But the only reason I did it, really, I know me, is because I got another friend to go with me.
Wow.
And I think it's really important. And I think so. Find somebody else who wants to impact the world, beginning in Kansas City, and just start doing what's uncomfortable. I'm reading a book by a Navy SEAL called Deliberate Discomfort, and it's talking about some of that thing we don't rise to the occasion, but we fall to our level of training. Similar to that, what this guy says is, if you're going to grow, you have to intentionally put yourself in places that are uncomfortable, because we do. He said this. He goes, "Comfort is the enemy of growth."
Wow.
So if you want to grow, in your relationship with Jesus, you put yourself in places where you're uncomfortable. And I heard another guy recently say, faith is spelled R-I-S-K.
Wow.
A walk of faith is where you take a risk. You continue to take a risk. So how do you do that in Kansas City? Well, I tell you, it's real simple. Go knock on some doors of places, people you don't know.
Holy smokes. Okay, I do want to ask a tactical question.
Yeah.
What's your opening line? You knock on the door, somebody answers. I would be like, I don't even know what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's really simple now. We just say this. Honestly, we just say this. We say, hey, we are in the community because we really care for people here. And is there anything that we can pray for you about? That's how we start. If we don't know them, we just ask them.
Lead with prayer.
Sometimes just lead with prayer. Just every time. If we don't know them, is there anything we can pray for you about? Most of the time, we get a yes. Not always. We never get an ugly, get out of my face, you jerk. We never get that. We're just asking if we can pray for them. And sometimes a lot of times they say, no, I'm okay. We'll just say, okay, bless you. And we go on to the next place. But a lot of times we'll get a yes. When we pray, as soon as we're done, I just immediately say, can I show you a picture? And here's the cool thing. I've never had the no answer. Ever, never had anyone say, no, I don't want to see the picture. And then I just say, hey, can I show you a picture? And I just show them this 3 circles picture, and I simply share the gospel. And you can get a sense for how much time you have. If it's kind of a stressful thing, you just go through it quickly and see what happens. But I just have found this is very simple. You care for the community, so you're just out praying for people. Is there anything we can pray for you about? And then as soon as you're done praying, you just share the gospel. Everything is done with no pressure because we love them. We care about them. So everything is done with a smile on our face. We're not there to condemn them. I had a guy I was flying with to come over here to Dubai. We just land in Chicago. He stands up in the aisle of the airplane and he says, hey, I want you all to know that God really loves you all. He goes, God is not mad at you. He's not mad at anybody in here. He loves you. And I just ask you, Holy Spirit, to come now and fill this airplane. And if any of you guys want to talk afterwards, just let me know. And I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness, what is happening? Well, we get out there, we're waiting for our little luggage, in that walkway area. I don't even know how many people, but numerous people walked by us, looked at him and said, thank you, man. Good word. Thanks for sharing. It was just like, this is in Chicago, Chicago, crazy Chicago. So sometimes, just being around people like that challenged me. He didn't do anything that anyone's going to get mad about. He said, we just love you guys. God loves you. He's not mad. So yeah, now that's pretty bold. I think that's pretty bold. So I haven't ever done that. All I'm saying is you can start with prayer. Most people will say yes to some prayer, and then you can just go into a simple sharing the gospel and just see where it goes. Yep.
Why do you think most pastors and most Christians, at least in that you've met, don't do this? Why? And it's so biblical. It's just Luke 10.
Yeah.
It's the Great Commission. It's the New Testament church.
The reason why I wasn't doing it is I could not, I just, yeah, I know. I did not have an easy transition into the gospel. I found that to be very challenging for me. How do I take my talk about the Chiefs and transition into the gospel? How do I take my conversation into the gospel? Now I have the tool. Hey, can I show you a picture? Never had a no. And so I can start any conversation. And then I say, hey, because I have it on my phone. I always have our phones with us, right? I just say, could I just show you a picture? And so for me, that having the simple tool, but then also doing it with other people has answered that question. It's changed my life. So now I'm sharing the gospel every day, just about every single day.
Wow.
And it's nothing special about that. It's just because now I have people around me We have the same vision. I have a simple tool, and I care about people. And I think, yeah, because I was there, bro. What you're talking about, I was there for 35 years. I wanted to share the gospel. I believed in heaven and hell. I loved people. I was just challenged with maybe it was fear, maybe it was fear of rejection. I don't know what it was, but now it I was still uncomfortable walking over to that group of Afghanis. Yeah, there's still a little bit of discomfort there, but now I'm glad I did. So, yeah.
I just want to give you permission to just share. This is not a brag, but I know the skepticalness, the skepticism, the skepticism, is that the word?
Uh-huh.
Of a lot of people listening to this. Well, yeah, does it work? Like, I mean, is it really effective? I mean, could you just give us as much as, not maybe not pinpoint, but as much as off the top of your head, what's the effectiveness since you've started using since you've really just started being more bold with directly sharing the gospel into a part of your rhythm, since you've made those shifts, what's the fruitfulness of people you've led to the Lord, disciples that you've made? Yeah. I mean, and maybe even share real numbers. Like if like, man,
now they're out. Now I've got people out doing it all over the world. And so one of them is your friend, Jonathan. Jonathan is in Tunisia. He's already gone out. He's already talking to people. He went through this training that I've talked about on these simple tools, and he went out with me, knocking on doors. He's been with me to Nati's apartment. So I just took him with me. So we got people like that out all over the place. And so that's been the exciting thing. Here's what I know. I can't say for sure what the amount of fruit is, but I can tell you one thing: if you don't do it, it's pretty easy to gauge. There's no fruit. So if you don't share the gospel, that's easy to gauge. If you do share the gospel, we don't really know what's going to happen. Like when we left those group of Afghans today, the guy who was with me was Wilson. We were both praying, God, we just ask that you show up, dreams, whatever you want to do. We just ask that the words that we shared, you will use those. And so part of it is when you do share the gospel, you may not know what the fruit is, but I do know one thing: if you don't share the gospel, you'll know. So why not? No, why not? Why not share? It's kind of fun too. A little scary, but it's kind of fun.
Absolutely. I know you shared the story of the gal who had a salon in her home. Did you have any other just recent kind of kingdom wins, people you've led to Christ, maybe churches that have started through you gospel, through you sowing seeds?
Yeah, we prayed with a lady, shared the gospel, and asked her, are you in the right relationship with God, or are you living in brokenness? She said, I'm living in brokenness. I said, well, is there any reason why you wouldn't want to accept Jesus now? She said, no. So she prayed to accept the Lord. Her name is Danielle. I found out why she was living in brokenness, because she had 8 children from a lot of different men, and they were all in a small 2-bedroom apartment there in Jacksonville. She never hardly is able to leave. I mean, you can't imagine how could you have a car with 8 children in it, She was really living in brokenness. And so we had a man and his wife started meeting with Danielle to disciple her. And so the thing is, it really comes back to believing the words of Jesus. When Jesus said that the harvest is ripe, the problem is not with the harvest. The problem is with the workers. And if we really believe what Jesus said, then we'll go out and we'll realize that we're going to see fruit when we obey Jesus. And obviously, it's not a majority. I don't know what the percentages are. But I know one thing: if you don't share the gospel, that's just the beginning aspect of discipleship. Then there's opportunity there, and I'm finding out that Jesus was right. Surprise, surprise, he was right. That the harvest is ripe, and so yeah, good stuff.
Amazing. Any final encouragement to anybody listening to this, whether they're a young leader, a young Christian, a young pastor, or maybe maybe somebody who's in a later season in their journey, maybe somebody like yourself, where you're,
Yep.
You're looking at maybe at the back third of life or whatever, where,
Yep.
God bless you. I hope you live till you're 200, but
no, I don't. I'm ready to go. I go to crazy places because I'm not afraid of dying, because I know when I die, it's going to be awesome. Anyway,
you are the man, dude.
For me, it's just for me, it's find a simple tool that you'll use. The best tool is the tool that you'll use. Find a tool that helps you go from normal conversation to gospel conversations. Just find the tool, get one or two people with you who have the same heart, and just start doing it. And then you'll begin to see some things develop out of the harvest, and things will begin to multiply, and it's all good. Yeah. So it's simple. Just got to do it.
Amazing. Mark, any kind of just final, just a blessing or anything just for our people? Any word of encouragement?
Deliberate discomfort. Deliberate discomfort. Put yourself in places that are not comfortable and you'll grow. And sharing the gospel is one of the best ways to do that. And it's good stuff.
Amazing, Mark. You're incredible.
All right.
Hey, is there any way if people want to follow up with you that they can, or are you covert? Is that like probably shouldn't?
Do what?
Is there any way that people can follow up with you after this?
Oh yeah, they can. I don't go covert. I have nothing to hide. So they can email me at markb@ocean117.com and shoot me an email if you have any questions. I'll get you in touch with where the tools are available. If you, I could also help possibly if, depending where you live, if you're interested in, if there's some networks around you, like a No Place Left network or something, I can help get you connected there. And so, yeah, shoot me an email and be happy to encourage anybody who's feels something tugging inside that they really want to get involved in making disciples who make disciples. If that's you, we'll do whatever we can to help. Yep.
Mark, you're a blessing to the kingdom, man.
All right.
Thank you,
bro.
So much for watching this interview. I hope it was an encouragement for you, hopefully equipped you. I have all the information for the show notes down there below for all those resources that Mark was making reference to. I will have links to all those and his email there if you want to follow up with him and reach out personally. But I have a big ask for you. If you could please, if you're watching this, you're an early adopter, please like, subscribe. And if this content was helpful, please share it with some of your friends that are in ministry and that are in leadership. Let's all be convergent leaders together and be better together for the cause of Christ and making disciples. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you later.